Hello, welcome to Tarot and Attachment. My name is Erin Smith, and I am a professional tarot reader and an associate marriage and family therapist. And I like to do these weekly readings to anchor us in insight as we're moving through our time on this planet and aware of what's going on around us and how we're being affected by that. And, asking for tools that we can use in order to navigate the world wisely. So, I was thinking about what it is that I wanted to focus on this week. And seeing as we are on the brink of a full moon in the sign of Scorpio, Scorpio being the sign of death and rebirth. And, the culmination of the full moon giving way to a new moon. We are always in this endless cycle of death and rebirth, arising and falling away. And so it seems like we are constantly in the throes of change. I think it's fair to say that's true. And I guess my question to the cards this week is something along the lines of how can we be in the flow of these changes, of this endless ebb and flow, and still stay focused on things that anchor us, that allow us to feel regulated and stable, even in the midst of this whirlwind of change. And how can we hold the tension of that seeming duality in a good way? So I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go silent. I'm going to concentrate while I shuffle. Yeah. Say a prayer, these cards. So much cup energy this week. and a really powerful message about surrender. So I love these. These are amazing. You know, here we are being reminded that source is an infinite flow that will always meet our needs, both materially and spiritually. That there is nothing that this flow is infinite and we have access to it at any time. I was going to say it's never not available, but it's not quite true, right? When we are too caught up in the day-to-day material aspects of our lives, it's easy to buy into the illusion that that's all there is. And then it makes it very hard to connect to this infinite flow. So I would say that there are things that we can do, and some of it is just the reminder that at any moment we can disentangle ourselves from the minutia of daily life and just check in, feel source. It could be as simple as lifting your face to the sun and to feel the warmth of the sun on your face, to know that we are being resourced. You know, pentacles are representative of the earth, the material bounty, the things that we need as embodied souls to thrive in the world. Our needs are being met in terms of divine right livelihood, in terms of, you know, abundance of life. Again, the sun itself shining down, growing the food that we consume. This beautiful, abundant flow of emotions, the ability to connect to our fellows, this feeling of love and compassion, this very high octave energy that makes us feel loved. And, you know, ACEs are like getting a divine download from the universe. It is this beautiful distilled energy that is like renewal. And so, and in some ways you might even say, this is the constant. This is what Spirit is saying is the constant. The form that this energy takes is always changing. It's always different. It appears to pop in and out. Similarly, the sun itself sets and then comes up every morning. And then it sets and comes up every morning. It's an infinite flow. But the overall effect is that we continue to have this connection to the light that we all live on. So, what are some things that we can do in order to maintain our connection to that infinite flow, being fed both materially and spiritually? So, these are such interesting cards here. So again, so much cup energy. Again, you know, Scorpio is an emotionally centered, watery energy. That is where the full moon is taking place. This may be a very emotional time for people. And emotions are interesting, you know, obviously it's like an energy in itself, and it helps us to recognize what feels good and what we want to generate more of or move in the direction towards. It can also be a deterrent. Oh, that feels bad. I don't really want to engage with that anymore. So emotions are a kind of information. And when it's too much or overwhelming, then we can shut down, you know, we can become flooded. And that will have an effect on our ability to show up in the world, to think logically or reasonably about a situation, to be present for a situation. If you are flooded with overwhelming emotions, you may just completely dissociate, and then it's very hard to engage with circumstances in a good way. So ultimately, what Spirit is saying is that in order to get right with our emotions, to have some clarity about them as a kind of inner guidance system, it is necessary to understand the root of our emotional experience, and in some ways, or under some certain circumstances, to let go of the past. I mean, this is really, the Eight of Cups is a card of transformation. And it's a transformation that takes place because we are really willing to walk away from old habit patterns, old emotional associations or identifications, in order to gain clarity about who we are today and what feels most right. So the story I tell with the Eight of Cups is that when a caterpillar spins itself a cocoon, in order to emerge as a butterfly, it first liquefies its body. So it has to disidentify from the old form in order to be reformed in a higher state of being. So this is a major transformation, and we don't get to do it halfway, right? The caterpillar can't sort of, hedge his bets and hold on to some of his caterpillar form and maybe incorporate certain aspects of the butterfly. Like, there is this liminal space of complete dissolving, and then he is able to become something new, something that is not bound to the earth, but is able to, fly. And the thing I always like to remind people of when this card comes up in readings is that this is not an easy process. If we think about this from the perspective of the caterpillar, it's terrifying. It feels like death. It is a kind of dying. And so it's natural to resist this process of transformation, to want to turn away from it or to shut it out. And yet we are being called to a higher form of ourselves, in which case we have to be willing to let go of the emotional stickiness that keeps us in an old habit pattern that we cannot fight our way out of. That this kind of surrender is necessary to get to the next stage in order to have access to this infinite flow of resources. And again, there's a kind of murkiness to this liminal stage. The Seven of Cups is what I call emotional vagary. So it's being in confusion or delusion around how you feel about something. And many times this card will show up in readings when we're afraid we're not going to get what we want, or we're going to lose what we have. So you can think of this as kind of like this self-imposed fog, this inability to connect to what it feels like to be in the presence of something or someone that you are longing for. But the fear that that will be denied is so devastating that you bar yourself from acknowledging any kind of desire whatsoever. And rather than being like a freedom, this inability to connect to our wants, our desires, that which we love, that which moves us emotionally, You know, when we've become jaded or fearful and we shut down awareness of that, it actually makes it hard to take right action. It isn't the freedom that we're seeking. It's a kind of avoidance. And so on the one hand, we're being called to connect with our hearts and to notice what is there and to be willing to be with it without resistance, without judgment. But we're also being asked to walk away from identities that don't serve us, or even, you know, a vision of the world that doesn't serve us anymore. You know, if you think about this period of time that we are currently in, this need for security and this grasping at things that we think are going to give us some sense of security. You know, if you look at this through a capitalist lens, needing or wanting to have that security and thinking that it comes in the form of things rather than connection or community, this might be an old identification that we would do best to leave behind, to let go of, to transform in some way. In order to bring us into a state where we're able to receive what we need in a more distilled way. So the Seven of Wands is an indicator that we may be in a point where we're still operating out of old coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms, that we are mistaking our present for the past. The Seven of Wands is saying we have overcome tremendous obstacles in order to get to where we're at in life. Things have not been easy. But we've been like the warrior. You know, we fought to stay alive. We were tenacious in our attempts to overcome those obstacles. But the message of the Seven of Wands is that there's no one left to fight. So it isn't us against the world anymore. It's us being supported by the world. And how would life look different? What might we move forward in a different way if we stopped viewing everyone and everything as something that we had to fight against in order to be okay, to be safe, to be resourced? What would happen instead if we saw our fellows as community members, as emotional support, as people who wanted the same things that we did, and in aligning ourselves with one another, unifying our sense of purpose, we were able to emotionally support one another to find a better, more collaborative way of being in the world. What if that were possible? How might that be? How might the experience of living feel more like an abundant flow rather than this scarcity that we all needed to fight over, scrapping and scraping to take our place in society? So justice is saying that this is a kind of karmic reckoning, if you will, that what we're up against are the effects of choices that have been made for hundreds of years. And we're starting to be able to see how some of those effects have been detrimental, both in terms of, you know, collective human society and in terms of our relationship with the environment. And so justice is a reminder that we live in a cause and effect universe. And ultimately, everything that's happening right now is tied to causes and conditions that came before. And so it takes a certain amount of equanimity and acceptance and responsibility, taking responsibility for what we have all created and really asking ourselves, is this the best we can do? And is this ultimately serving the needs of people? And if the answer is no, how can we choose again? How can we show up in a new way, letting go of the old way, getting clear about what it is that we want from a perspective of that which is ideal, like shooting towards an ideal. Obviously, we're not going to be perfect, but if we make the ideal of equality, equanimity, abundant flow of resources and connection, if that becomes our guiding light, what might transpire from there if we're willing to take those simple actions? And once we have that vision in our sights, once we're sort of emotionally motivated to move in that direction, then the Two of Wands is telling us we just take simple steps and we stay in the present tense. We use that as our guiding light, but we keep taking the next right indicated step. So the Two of Wands is about exploring new territory. You have to begin somewhere. You have to lay the groundwork to build anything new. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens incrementally in stages over time. And you have to stay concentrated, fixed on the source. Have a vision, but then keep showing up. And to really know that what we are creating is very different from where we've been. So whenever you're on the brink of a new experience, it is necessary to throw out the old maps. So we want to create something new. So we're going to do something different. We're going to take some different actions in order to make this new thing come into being. And we're just going to stay focused and know that the path will unfold before us. And finally, we have the King of Cups, and kings represent mastery, maturity, being in a position of authority in terms of one's own life, being able to practice volition. And ultimately, what the King of Cups is asking us to do is feel our feelings deeply without being knocked off center by them. And to allow love and compassion to be our guiding principle, the thing that helps us orient in this great world of change. And knowing how we wish to show up in a world where we're really being called to let some things go. I think it's pretty clear that we're moving in a direction that's not sustainable. So I don't know, that looks pretty hopeful to me. An infinite flow of nourishment and compassion. And just taking those simple steps to transform ourselves. And as within, so without. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you have a glorious and blessed full moon on Monday. Take care.